What do you really know about your investments and your financial advisor? Gary Cinderbrandt, a veteran advisor and founder of Better Path Training, has spent decades helping both financial advisors and their clients get it right when it matters most. Gary pulls back the curtain on the advisory world to reveal the truths, the gaps, and the opportunities that most people never hear about, but absolutely should. It's about more than money. It's about legacy, trust, and making sure the people you care about are in the right hands. Welcome to If the Public Only Knew. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. Your host, Gary Cinderbrandt. Today we are joined by a particularly interesting guest. So I'm going to ask you folks to kind of stick with it a little bit, and I think you'll understand why, whether you're a financial advisor or a client. I think you'll understand why my guest today, Wendy Cocke, has so many interesting things to talk about. Briefly, Wendy started her career in the corporate world, and then based upon wanting to be a working mother, but not also be full-time and raise her children at the same time, really pushed for quite a while, I guess about a year, to move into this area of flexible work, which kind of evolved into something completely different. So Wendy now spends her time as the founder of Engineering Leadership Solutions, an LLC. She is the author of 2 books, Making Flex Work, defining success on your own terms, and Reimagine Your Work, managing your career like it's a business, both of which I'm all for. Wendy, welcome to the show.
It is great to be here, Gary. I cannot wait for our conversation. It's going to be so much fun.
So Wendy, when we were chatting briefly, I was talking about the role of a financial advisor and how even though financial advisors have complete control over their hours, over their time, over their location, even over who they work with, I would tell you in my 4 decades of doing it, I don't ever remember not thinking about work, not thinking about the people that have entrusted me with the management and oversight of their wealth. So it was really hard to turn off. So even though I may not have been located in an office, it was very difficult to move away from that. Have you run into that before? How do you kind of square that circle?
Well, I would say you've been doing hybrid work your entire career. I mean, when we think about flexible work, we like to put it into, is it different than our 9 to 5 job? But what we really mean when we look back is just non-traditional ways of thinking about the way we're going to do work. And when we reflect on it, most of us that have those white collar jobs have not been just working a 40-hour job for most of our careers. Right? When I went part-time, I used to tell people the difference between full-time and 32 hours was way more than 8, because 40 is never 40. 40 is the time that you're committed to be there, but your brain is working elsewhere, or you're getting that call because the project isn't going right, or you're getting that call because a client needs something and it's in your after hours. That full-time job is really whatever system you've set up. It's as much as you allow yourself to be available. And so when we think about a transition to a more hybrid or non-traditional schedule, it's really not as big of a change as we like to pretend that it is. Because most of us are checking our emails when we are not on the clock. Most of us are responding to text messages when we're not on the clock. Most of us are taking phone calls when it's important, regardless of the time of day. All we're doing is now acknowledging those types of interactions as also part of our workday.
Okay. So I'll come back to my industry for a bit. And here I'm talking about, anyone that's in the advice business, whether they're registered investment advisors, working under the SEC regulations, or doing the same job, pretty much working under the regulations from FINRA, where the big firms hang out. So I recall back in the early 90s, as computers were getting smaller and a little bit faster, Merrill Lynch, where I was at the time, started to enable financial advisors to basically create virtual sessions on their own computers. You could dial in through a shell and you could replicate what was happening on your desktop with a session on a computer you would sign into and essentially have access to the same information, all the same network permissions, all the same access to markets and data. And it really removed the concept of you having to be in a particular place to accomplish a certain type of work. It used to be if you wanted to access market information, client information, and correspond with clients and create transactions, you had to be in that spot.
Right.
But comment, if you will, on what the impact was of this kind of portability for location, but also having the ability to be completely locked into the same data that you needed to even work that 40-hour week, even if you were sitting at the top of a mountain or on a beach somewhere, that
Oh,
same
absolutely.
40 hours. How does that work?
Yeah, so it becomes much more of a continuum of work and life. When work has to happen on a machine or at a desk in a particular office. So think back to the 1950s, 1960s, where there might have been one of something, and in order for you to interact with it, you had to be where it was, right? Now you fast forward into the 90s, as you were saying, and we have a situation where we can start to bring things with us other places as long as you have a connection. I remember the first house I bought. One of the things, the first thing we did, even before we had moved in all the furniture and unpacked the boxes, was run Ethernet cables to all of the rooms so that we could have the ability to plug in that computer anywhere that we thought we might want it, because work could now happen in any of those places. Then you get into the 2000s and we take away between 2000 and 2015, right? We take away that need to even be tethered to a wall anymore, and we start to put it in our pocket. And what it does is it gives us the freedom to work from wherever we are, but it also gives us as the employee the burden to work from wherever we are. So this idea of being able to totally disconnect is very different, because I can't just leave it at the office. It comes with me. So I have a lot of my colleagues who now work totally remote. They started during the pandemic, and for whatever reason, they don't go back to an office. Right? The company figured out that they didn't need to pay for the overhead because it wasn't of value to them to have everybody in the office. And those individuals, especially ones that don't have other outside commitments to take their time, find that they work much longer because there's no reason to stop. So you can imagine if you were in the pandemic and you lived by yourself and you weren't able to go anywhere, why wouldn't you just work all the time? Because that box or that little pocket phone has work constantly coming in. It's never turning off, especially if you work in a global company or in a company across multiple time zones. Work happens while you're sleeping. It's still coming in. And so I encourage many of them, and maybe some of your listeners, this will be helpful for them, is when you finish work for the day, whatever that means for you, or you finish work for the week, whatever that means for you, close that device and put it behind a door. Put it in your hallway closet, put it in the guest room, put it in a cabinet somewhere where you don't see it. Because if it sits there on the counter and you walk by it, your brain has been programmed to know that there's work in there. And the minute you turn it on for just one thing, now you've gone into a rabbit hole. Right? So being able to create mechanisms to disconnect from it is important. I think you and I talked about, if you're going out golfing, leave it in your bag. Or if you're out to dinner and you're supposed to be networking, don't pull it out. Right? But the same idea at home, when you're done, find a way to put it away. Out of sight, out of mind really does help as we think about this infinite workday. And I shared with you this study, and I think some of your listeners will be really interested in it. Microsoft just put it out at the end of June, and they're now calling it the infinite workday. They have been looking at all of our telemetry data that we use through all of those online Microsoft projects. And they have found that most of us are checking our email before 6 a.m. local time, meaning that we're checking it from bed. Or maybe we're checking it on our way to the gym, or we're checking it on the way to work, time that we would have been doing other things in the past, right? They found that on average, we're getting more than 50 messages after these core business hours, and nearly a third of us are back on our email after 10 p.m. local time. You and I share that we like to know what has happened since we went to
Yeah.
bed. So we are those early morning. I have spent most of my career working with global organizations. So I always did it right before bed just to know what was happening as Asia was waking up. Right? Was there anything I needed to deal with in their first 2 hours of work? But Microsoft has said, yeah, look, you guys are doing it. These days never end. So this idea that there is any option other than hybrid, it's just silly because we're all working outside of the office already.
I recently had as a guest on the podcast an incredibly interesting, uh, really talented CEO named Tatiana Mahmout. And Tatiana is in the tech space, but she has a PhD in cultural anthropology. And we really got into a discussion about the evolution of culture as it relates to technology, that no culture can really evolve without technology, whether that's the invention of fire, the wheel, the printing press, whatever the case may be. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the habituation, if you will, of never wanting to be too far away from one of these things. That if it's not there and we don't have access to it, we start to like shake a little bit. And it's almost become, and we used this metaphor before, like smoking cigarettes. It's so habitual that if it's not in your visage or in your hand, it's like there's a part of you missing. I never used to feel that way. I mean, when the first cell phones came out and they weighed 12 pounds and lasted an equivalent number of minutes in battery, you never thought it would work to the point where you now have access not only to all the world's unorganized data, but through AI chatbots, it'll organize it for you. So, how do we segregate that habit from enjoying our life in general, or has it just become part of it at this point?
Well, I think the answer is being intentional. So, in making flex work, one of the things that I talk about is a 4-step process called the evaluation method, which is a really looking at when and where you are doing your work and how is it serving you and serving your organization. I have these free tools on my website as well if any of your listeners are interested. But what I ask you to do is for 7 days, and you can start that today. Doesn't have to be on a Monday. Doesn't have to be at 8 a.m. It could be, I'm going to start on Thursday at noon. And I just want you for 7 days to record when you are working in like 15, 20-minute blocks. Did I work? Did I not? And I'm going to start that over. Something just fell at my house. So in my book, in the evaluation method, one of the things we have is a tool where I want you to journal your time for a week. And what I want you to do is understand when and where are you currently working. So if you are getting on that phone at 6 in the morning, I want you to write that down. If you are logging on at 11 o'clock at night, I want you to write that down. And we're going to treat it like data. My background is engineering, so I treat everything as an engineering problem. We cannot change what we do not know. So we've got to get a baseline of what you are doing today. And then we're going to then analyze how we want to approach that. Are we happy with the balance that we have, or are we not? Is it serving us? In which case, keep doing it. And if it's not serving you, then let's make small changes. That's the L in EVANL, leveraging small changes. That's the 4th and final step. But the first step is knowing what it is that you're doing, because maybe it works for you. For me, as a mom of 2 teenagers, being able to work in little bursts of time from anywhere is really important to my balance in life at this stage. Right? I call my car my mobile office, and I have it set up to be able to work from any parking lot anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd spend a lot of time waiting on children. So being able to use that time allows me to then be present with them when they're around. Now, maybe that doesn't serve someone else, and maybe it doesn't serve me in 2 to 3 years. But checking in with yourself and being intentional, understanding that it's not just this habit, but it's something that I am doing for a purpose, I think is the really important part of that relationship with technology. I find myself when I go onto LinkedIn, which is a place where I'm very active, I don't know why, but the minute I close LinkedIn, I grab Facebook and Instagram. My brain just does it. And I have to intentionally say, that is not why I was on this phone. I was on this phone to take care of something on LinkedIn and to close it. But your brain gets into the check mode, right? I'm going to check these other platforms because things have come into it too. And so you have to say, nope, that's not what I'm doing. Or you can say, yeah, you know what? I've got another 5 minutes to kill. Let's go watch some videos.
Yeah.
But you have to be intentional with your time. And the best way to do that, just like you guys tell your clients, you don't let money just do what it's doing. You don't let your investments just do what it's doing. You're intentional with it. You monitor it. You see what is serving you and what isn't. You're making positions in the portfolio and decisions based on performance and output and goals. We're just doing the exact same thing with our time.
So one of the things that's happened, particularly in my industry, where you go to work and you'd have your assistant or your team, and if they weren't the ones that were outwardly facing, responsible for taking care of the current clients and promoting new business, essentially they were at the office. They were at the office 5 days a week. And some of them would come in early and might leave late, but that's where they were. And you could kind of understand how things moved through a production schedule. But in COVID, everyone's working remotely. And a lot of companies had to do a lot of things that were different, especially in the regulatory environment of financial services, because where it says most of your work needs to be done in what can be certified as a branch office. And there's real strict rules and regulations around that. So the regulatory authorities had to make some changes with that. But when COVID kind of began to enter its ebb phase, the policies and procedures that were put in place to allow people to work from home weren't necessarily reversed, as I'm sure you know.
That's right.
It became kind of a
Can't go
thing
back.
where, right, it's like we would really prefer if you come in 3 days a week, and people would come back and say, well, I don't feel safe doing that. I didn't this, I didn't do that. So now all of a sudden you're into this whole kind of HR environment where you might be forcing people into what they perceive as an unsafe environment. And it doesn't matter if that's true or not. It's the perception of that person. And as that continued, some companies have put policies back in. And those policies stay 3 days a week. You got to be in the office. But those 2 days a week, talking to a lot of my friends, they're not as productive because they can't always get their team on the phone. Their team can't talk to each other freely like they normally would do. Maybe they're all on an outside chat or something like that. But the communication breaks down. And if one person was supposed to prepare a performance report and the other was supposed to prepare a proposal, and the third was supposed to move some money from point A to point B, there's less and less communication. Things are falling through the cracks. But you can't get them all to come in, or you can't get them all to come in on the same day. So you're dealing with something where if you're running a business, which essentially a financial advisor is running a business, and
Certainly.
that business can be run no matter what name's on the door. For a senior advisor, it's the same product line. It's just a different logo, whether it's UBS, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, or LPL. It's a different logo, but products and services that you access are kind of the same.
That's right.
And it's all about what the client impression is. But if your team's not there and you start to have that gap because you don't know what your next gen employee who's 26 is doing because he or she decides, I'm going to work from home 3 days a week. There's no way to, I don't want to say enforce it, but really to get comfortable that these are the things that are happening that need to happen, because you don't know if she's actually working or having an argument with her husband or her boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever the case may be. And I hate to say it's a generational issue, but I want to put that as a counterpoint around this recent crop of college graduates that's coming into a job market environment that is completely different than it was, not just pre-COVID, but even a year ago, between downsizing in the tech space and a variety of other things where we're seeing that. Is this a pendulum that's swinging side to side from the standpoint of intentionality or let's call it, being comfortable, um, mandating that you're not going to be working 8 hours a day. And if you can't see me, I'm going to do what I want to do. How do we work that out as either a leader or someone that's working independently, like most financial advisors do? How do you work that out? How do you motivate that?
Yeah, to make hybrid work, it is important to understand how to facilitate the right work from the right place at the right time. And you've hit on all of those in your question, which is, as a leader, do I know what work each person needs to do? And can I clearly articulate that to them? And do they understand what work is required of them? Do I know where is the right place for that work to happen? Is that collaborative work that needs to be together? Is it collaborative work that's actually better if we're not co-located? Is it collaborative work, or is it individual work that is better in one location than the other? And some people could say collaborative all needs to be in person, and heads down focus can be done at home. Depending on your home, it might be easier to have the heads down focused work at the office. Depending on what collaboration means, it might actually make more sense to be separated. So it's not one or the other, right? So, but you need to know what's the right work and what's the right place for that work to get done. And it needs to be able to articulate, the leader does, to the team, the value of the place, that we were intentional with the place, and this is why that place matters. And then the right time is the last piece of that. Because as you said, if there are handoffs that need to happen, people knowing that it's my time to take the baton or it's my time to pass the baton, those are really important. Some things, it doesn't matter if I get it done at 8 in the morning or at 4 in the afternoon. And some things, it very much matters that I get done before the market closes or before it opens, right? So understanding where do I fit for the right work, right place, and right time is how you make this work. Unfortunately, most of our leaders have not been trained on how to do those things. We got very comfortable leading with the skills and the tools that we had in a pre-pandemic world. And we relied pretty heavily, myself as a leader, on our eyeballs. We believed that if we saw someone, they were doing work. But let me tell you, there are lots of people that did not produce what they needed to produce, even though their butts were in the seats, right? We all know those people that come in early, leave late, and don't accomplish anything. But as a leader, we trusted our eyeballs to help us sort that out. And now we have taken that tool away from the leaders and we have not given them something back. If you remember in COVID, there were all those mouse wigglers and all these other things because we were trying to watch work, and work meant activity on a computer.
Yeah.
That's just not a tool we have anymore. Our eyeballs are not going to be our most effective way. And so as a leader, you have to figure out how to communicate with your team what you need when you need it. And you have to just be a better leader than you were. Unfortunately, for those leaders who maybe have gotten comfortable with their old skills and aren't looking for new ones, it's only getting harder because, as you mentioned, we have every semester new students graduating from college. And they have no perception of your old way. They have literally never worked in a pre-COVID world. As a matter of fact, today's college graduates didn't even go to college in a pre-COVID world. And they have done even their high school jobs in a post-COVID world. And every semester we're getting more of those. So this idea that anyone talks about going back, we literally have an entire generation that has no concept of what the back is.
Interesting. It's true.
So all we can do is move forward.
Yeah.
And it's going to be incumbent on us, or we're not going to have the best talent. I believe what we'll see, and I'm going to guess that some of your listeners have seen this already, where leaders who can figure out how to make this right work, right place, right time effective are able to hire the top talent. Because the top talent wants that flexibility. They want to be trusted. They want to be able to do the work on their own terms. So I believe we're going to end up more and more with these haves and have-nots from a talent standpoint, that the best leaders are going to be able to pull the best talent from anywhere in the country, maybe even in the world, depending on the industry. And that top talent is going to be able to work for the best leaders in the best organizations, regardless of where they live. So this idea that you could be the best in your little town, big fish, small pond, it's breaking down right now.
Yeah,
so it's not going to be good enough to be the
it's a great
best in your
point.
geography.
Yeah,
You've got to be the best.
You make a really great point. And it's just a fascinating area to think about. And I know I've got a great guest. When the longer we talk, the more questions I have, but I want to be respectful of your time. How can people find you? How can people learn more?
Excellent. So I am very active on LinkedIn. If you want to look me up on LinkedIn, you can search Wendy Cocke or Wendy Anderson Cocke. There are not a lot of us. You will find me. You can also go to engineeringleadershipsolutions.com or makingflexwork.com. I am a one-woman show. So those two websites point you to the exact same spot. You only need to remember one of them. But I have a ton of free resources there. There's also ways to connect with me. And if you are a leader and you're struggling with this idea of how do I facilitate this work with my team, and you need somebody to come in and help you problem solve, I love to come into organizations and help you think about your work differently so you can figure out what is that right work, what is the right place, and how do I make sure it's getting done at the right time.
Fascinating. We'll make sure we include all of those relevant links in the show notes. Wendy, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a fascinating discussion. I would love to continue it at some point. And I wish you a happy 4th of July, a great long weekend. And thanks again for joining us here on If the Public Only Knew.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out If the Public Only Knew with Gary Cinderbrandt. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to follow the show and share it with another advisor, investor, or friend. For more on Gary or to check out any links mentioned in the episode, head to the show notes. We'll see you next time.